The stars were quiet that night. Captain Rena sat alone on the bridge of her patrol ship, the Aurora Watch. They had been drifting through the outer rim of human space for days. No signals, no ships, no voices, just silence. It was the kind of silence that made people uncomfortable. But Rena liked it, until something broke it. At first, it was just a soft sound, barely a whisper over the static. She leaned closer to the comms panel, her eyes narrowing. It wasn't normal space noise. Not background radiation. It sounded like singing, low, deep, slow. Voices not in words but tones, Gregorian chants. Rena frowned, her fingers moving fast across the controls. She filtered the sound, removed the static, and boosted the signal. The chant grew stronger. It was real. "Ensign Cato, are you hearing this?" she asked without looking. The young officer rushed to her station and nodded slowly. "Yes, Captain. It's live. The signal is at 432 hertz. Perfect pitch." Rena froze. That frequency was sacred to some ancient human groups, believed to heal, believed to calm, but in deep space? Impossible. The ship's AI spoke in its calm, female voice. Source unknown. Signal not matching any known civilization. Rena listened again, and suddenly, she felt something strange. Her chest grew tight, her eyes wet. Tears slipped down her cheeks and she didn't know why. "What is this?" she whispered, and the chant played on, like it was calling her, down in engineering. Other crew members began acting odd. One tech stopped working and stood frozen, listening. Another dropped a tool and whispered, "It feels like home, even." The ship's dog, a small black terrier, began whining softly. Something was not right, or maybe too right. It felt familiar, but no one had ever been here before. Navigator Lease reported something else. "We've traced the signal to a point in space," he said, his voice shaky. Rena looked at the coordinates and her blood ran cold. It was a forbidden zone, Sector E33, known by only one name in deep space records, the Sacred Void. Ships sent there never came back. No stars, no planets, just darkness. "Captain, the signal is getting louder," Cato said again. "Even when we don't move like it's finding us." Rena made a decision in seconds. "Set a course for it," she said quietly. "But Captain, that sector is, I know what it is," she cut him off. "But something wants us there." As the ship turned, the chanting grew louder in every speaker, not overwhelming, but deeper, fuller, like a live choir hidden inside the stars. Rena stood at the viewing glass, staring into the void. The stars ahead seemed to ripple like water. Suddenly, a small flash of light blinked in the distance. Then another, then many. Shapes began to move behind the veil of space too large to understand, too far to measure. "We've passed the last beacon," Lise reported. They were officially alone now. No backup, no law, only the chant. And the unknown. That night, the crew had strange dreams. Many woke up sweating, confused, crying. Rena dreamed of walking through a cathedral made of stars, of standing before statues that sang without mouths, of placing her hand on a glowing stone and hearing all of humanity's memories at once. When she woke up, her first words were, "It's waiting for me." She went back to the bridge before anyone else. The chant was still there, still live, still at 432 hertz. As if someone or something was performing it in real time. She knew now this wasn't just a sound, it was a message, and maybe a warning. Or maybe an invitation. The ship continued deeper into the sacred void, and the silence of space had become something else entirely. A sacred night had begun, and none of them would return unchanged. Captain Rena stared at the glowing screen in front of her. The coordinates pulsed like a heartbeat. Sector E33. Her fingers hovered over the controls, but she didn't press anything. She didn't have to. The ship was already changing course on its own. Cato gasped from the navigation console. "Captain." "We didn't give the command." The Aurora Watch was moving, guided by something unseen. Rena gave a sharp look to the AI panel. Override manual controls, she said. The AI responded softly. Unable to comply, current trajectory locked. By external source, a silence fell on the bridge, but it wasn't like before now. It was full of pressure, like space itself was watching them. Rena clenched her jaw. Then let it take us. We'll see what's waiting. Hours passed, the chant continued, same tone, same harmony, like it had no beginning, no end. Some crew members put on headsets to block the sound. Others leaned closer to it, drawn in like moths to a flame. Ensign Mira came to Rena in the mess hall, her hands shaking. Captain, I saw a woman in my room, she whispered. She was glowing blue. She said my name. She said I was born for this. Rena placed a calm hand on Myra's shoulder. You're not alone, she said. I think we were all chosen, meanwhile. In engineering, strange things were happening. Metal tools began to vibrate. The engines hummed in sync with the chant. And deep within the reactor core, a symbol appeared. No one had carved it. It was just there, a spiral within a circle, ancient, perfect, unsettling. Cato and Lise worked together to check ship records. They discovered something that made their skin crawl. Every time they tried to plot a course away from Sector E33, the system reset, as if reality itself rejected their attempt. Lise muttered, "It's like we're inside a dream, or someone else's memory." Rena stood alone in the observation deck that night. The stars beyond were starting to vanish, not because of distance, but because of a veil, dark, soft, alive. In the middle of that darkness, a single light blinked, not a star, not a planet, but a structure, massive, floating, impossible. It looked like a cathedral, but not made of stone. It was made of something ancient, metal, crystal, and energy. Woven together, it had no engines, no thrusters, yet it drifted with purpose, and from it came the chant. Cato's voice cracked over the intercom. "Captain, you need to see this." Rena rushed back to the bridge. He pointed at the scanner. The cathedral was not alone. There were thousands of small objects orbiting it, like drones or guardians, but none of them moved toward the ship. They were waiting. Suddenly, a single word appeared on every screen, not in English, not in any known language, but somehow they all understood it. "Enter." Rena sat down slowly in her chair. She felt cold and warm at the same time, afraid, but calm. Like standing on the edge of something sacred, something ancient and divine. She turned to the crew and spoke. "No more doubts. We're not here by mistake. Prepare to board." As the ship approached the floating cathedral, the chant shifted. It was still at 432 hertz, but now there was a new sound beneath it, like a heartbeat, like breathing, like a voice trying to form words, but not yet ready to speak. The Aurora watch slowed to a stop, its lights dimmed, its engines quieted. Outside the viewing window, the cathedral opened, like a blooming flower in the void. A path of light stretched toward them, welcoming, beckoning, calling them into the silence that was no longer silent. Rena whispered, "This is the beginning of the sacred night." Captain Rena stood still, her breathing slow. The others waited, but no one dared speak. The last word had been sung through her lips without her own voice. It was as if something inside the cathedral had used her mouth. The orb no longer glowed, but the air around them shimmered gently. Cato whispered, "Captain, what just happened to you?" She didn't answer, not right away, because something deeper had changed. They turned back toward the great hallway. The path behind them was no longer empty. Statues stood along the sides, tall, cloaked, unmoving, but they hadn't been there. When they entered, the crew froze. Rena's hand went to her sidearm. Juno whispered, "I swear those weren't there before." Then slowly, one statue turned its head. A soft sound followed, not a voice, but breath, like a sleeping creature taking its first inhale. The chant returned, this time much lower. It came from the statues, not speakers, not systems. They were singing. Their mouths didn't move, but the sound poured out from inside them, rich, layered, holy. Each note felt alive. The sound moved through the stone floor like a pulse. Kato dropped to one knee, clutching his helmet. It's too much. I feel like I'm inside their voices. Mira crouched beside him, holding his shoulder. It's not pain, it's too much truth. Rena stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the nearest statue. It turned fully to face her. The hood of its cloak rose slightly. Inside was not a face, not flesh, not machine, just light. Pure golden light, spinning like a galaxy. The statue tilted its head, and a warm wave passed through her chest. Then, a voice echoed not in the ears, but in her bones. Awakened, but not yet worthy. More statues began to sing, their tones rising and falling in perfect unity. The walls pulsed with color, patterns dancing like waves. The air grew thicker, but not heavy. It felt like it was charged with memory. Juno touched a statue's arm without fear. Instantly, his eyes rolled back and he fell to the floor. The chant stopped. Rena rushed over, kneeling beside him. "Juno, speak to me," she whispered. He opened his eyes slowly, glowing gold for a moment. "I saw them," he said quietly. "The real choir. They're not statues, they're echoes of something eternal." Suddenly, the floor beneath them shifted. The chamber lowered like an elevator sinking deep underground. No motion, no sound, just gravity shifting. The statues descended with them. Still singing, now the song carried images. Visions filled their heads, ancient cities of light, skies filled with flying ships, and planets worshipping a single glowing tower. Mira trembled. "We were part of this," she whispered. "Humans." "We're there in the visions, standing beside the choir." Lise finally spoke, voice heavy with awe. "They remember us," he said. "They waited for us to remember them." The chamber opened into a vast hall made of mirrored walls. Each wall showed not their reflections, but versions of themselves. One image showed Rena dressed in silver robes, her eyes glowing, leading thousands in song. Another showed Kato in armor of light, protecting children under a burning sky. The choir stood in a circle around them now, forming a dome of living song. They began to chant something new, an invitation. The center of the room shimmered. A platform rose from the ground. On it stood a chair tall, carved from crystal. The choir's song called to Rena, not with words, but feeling. She knew what they wanted. She had to sit. Her legs moved before her mind did. She stepped onto the platform, her hand brushing the edge of the chair. A blast of warmth surged through her body. As she sat down, the entire room dimmed. The choir sang louder, faster, brighter, and the statues began to vanish, turning into ribbons of golden wind. Their song fused into one solid tone, deep, ancient, perfect. And then, the voice returned. Not from the choir, not from the orb, but from the cathedral itself. "You carry the echo of the first song. Only one trial remains." The crystal chair glowed beneath her. The mirrored walls shattered, and Rena found herself floating in black space, alone. No ship, no crew, only stars and a single note still ringing in her chest. The choir had given her something, a gift, or maybe a burden, and the sacred night was only just beginning. Captain Rena floated in the void. There was no up or down, no light or shadow, only the silent hum of that final note echoing in her chest. She could not move, yet she did not fall. Time stretched thin like glass, and then shattered. The stars around her twisted into lines, lines into shapes, shapes into memory. Suddenly, she stood on solid ground, but it was not earth. It was a vast field of silver grass beneath a violet sky. In the distance stood tall beings of light-robed, graceful, ancient. They turned toward her, and without speaking, she heard them. "You have returned." 1,000 visions crashed into her at once. Ancient humans in white armor stood side by side with the choir. They defended planets not their own, carried lost children through storms, built cities with nothing but their minds and their songs. And when the war came, they did not run. They stood and fought until the stars wept. Rena stumbled, overwhelmed. "What is this?" she whispered. The beings of light answered in unison. This is the pact. Long ago, before Earth had even frozen its first meal, humanity was lifted, not by technology, but by harmony. The choir had chosen humans for one reason, because they felt, because their emotions weren't weakness. They were music. Together they had built a system of peace. But something went wrong. Rena saw it in pieces. A betrayal, a burning tower, a signal cut off, a sacred night. Forgotten. The choir didn't blame them. They mourned them. They waited. Waited for humanity to find the signal again. You carry their blood, said the light. And their burden. A glowing map of stars appeared in the sky above her. One system blinked red. Another showed shadowed movement like fleets, and one tiny star shined brighter than the rest. It was Earth, unaware of everything. The sacred pact can be restored, said the voice, but only by choice. Suddenly, Rena was surrounded by other versions of herself. One wore a crown of metal and flame, one was alone, her face twisted by fear. One had blood on her hands, too much to wash away, and one stood tall, singing with the choir. The voice returned. Who will you become, Captain of the Forgotten? She fell to her knees, hands shaking. I'm just a soldier, she said. I didn't ask for this. Neither did the first, replied the choir. But they answered anyway. A shape began forming beside her, a crystal blade, light. Ran through it like liquid fire. She touched it, and memories surged. The weapon wasn't for killing. It was for sealing the pact, cutting away fear, binding hope into flesh and time. Behind her, the field vanished. The cathedral returned. Her team stood around her, confused, afraid. Only moments had passed for them, but Rena's eyes were different now, older. The orb in the center chamber now pulsed red. It was time. She raised the crystal blade and placed it gently into the orb. No force, no violence, only intent. The chamber trembled. Statues awoke, the choir returned, and they sang a new song, deeper, stronger, a song of renewal. Mira whispered. She changed. Something. Cato nodded slowly. She remembered. The entire cathedral brightened. All walls, all floors, all forgotten rooms. The symbols glowed with meaning again. The statues began to walk, not float, not hover, but walk like guardians returned. From slumber, a massive door opened at the far end of the hall. Beyond it, a bridge of stars, a path to another realm, a place no human had ever been. Not in memory, but in truth. Rena turned to her crew, her voice calm but burning with purpose. We're not explorers anymore, she said. We're the last echo of the first promise. And as the crew followed her through the starlit door, the cathedral slowly closed behind them, not to trap, but to protect. The sacred night had begun again, and the galaxy was watching. Asterisk, the door of starlight swallowed them whole. Captain Rena and her crew stepped across the bridge of stars. The floor beneath them was not solid. It shifted like liquid glass, each step lighting up ancient runes. Behind them, the cathedral slowly sealed shut. Its golden light dimmed, leaving only the vastness of what lay ahead. No spacesuits, no helmets. They could breathe. The air was sweet like wild fruit and cold like early morning. The sky above wasn't space. It was a swirling canvas of songs, visible music, floating in colors no human had names for. Mira stopped and looked around. Where are we? She whispered. Juno stepped beside her. This isn't any known dimension. Cato checked his scanner. It was blank. Nothing works here, he said, shaking it. Not even time. Rena added quietly. She didn't need tech to understand. This was the sacred path between worlds, a place outside war, outside logic, a space built for something greater. As they moved forward, the stars around them bent and sang. They sang of forgotten wars, healing, betrayal, and rebirth. Each note told a piece of the truth, some painful, some beautiful. One star cried as they passed. Another hummed with joy. The path was alive. It watched them, judged them, and welcomed them. Then suddenly, the light shifted. Ahead was a massive gateway, circular, ancient, held by pillars made of rotating suns. Guarding it were three enormous beings, not statues, not machines. They looked like cloaked titans made of stone and stardust. Each one held a staff that reached into the sky. Their faces hidden, but their voices echoed together. "You bear the old spark," they said in unison. "But do you carry it as a weapon or a song?" Rena stepped forward alone. "I don't know yet," she said honestly, "but I carry it with respect." The gate behind them pulsed, and the titans slowly lowered their staffs. The center of the portal cracked like breaking ice. Inside it, they saw a vision of Earth, but not the Earth they knew. This one was surrounded by dark ships, its skies filled with fear, and its leaders silent. Juno gasped, "Is that now?" "No," said Mira, her voice trembling. "It's soon." The Titans' voices returned. "The sacred night begins not with song, but with choice. You may return," said one, "or step forward." "And become something forgotten," said the second. The third Titan raised his head slightly. "And if you do, others will follow." Behind them, more gates opened, each one showing different worlds, some peaceful, some burning, and in every image, beings turned toward the stars, as if they too had heard the 432 Hertz chant. The sacred signal had spread. Rena realized the truth. The choir had never only called her. It had awakened all the old echoes in the universe. Now others were listening, watching her, waiting to see if humans would rise again. She looked at her team. Their faces showed fear but also wonder and trust. "Do we go?" she asked softly. Cato smiled. "We've already stepped too far to turn around." Mira nodded. "And I want to know what comes next." Rena stepped into the swirling gate. The others followed. They vanished into the heart of the sacred night. Their bodies faded into golden sparks, and as they passed, the stars around them began to hum louder. In distant corners of the galaxy, other gates opened. Other races heard the call. Some feared it. Others fell to their knees in worship. And in one war-torn system, a forgotten people stood still. Their machines stopped. Their leaders knelt, and a single phrase passed across all their minds. "The song has returned, and with it, the humans." The sacred night was no longer a secret. It had begun, and it would change the galaxy forever. They did not land. They emerged from the other side of the gate. Rena and her crew floated gently into a space between stars. But this was no normal space. The laws of physics bent like whispers here. Thoughts carried weight, and emotion became light. All around them were shapes, echoes of others answering the call. Some were human, some were not. A giant avian creature flew past, wings made of crystal and memory. A shadowy alien knelt on an invisible floor, weeping without tears. The sacred night had awakened not just the humans, but every being who once knew the song and forgot. Captain Rena now wore robes of gold and silver. She didn't remember putting them on, but they fit her like purpose. In her hand, the crystal blade shimmered. It was no longer a weapon. It was a baton. She was no longer a soldier. She was the conductor of something old and beautiful. The choir returned, not just the statues, not just the voices, but the living, breathing presence of the sacred order. They formed a ring of light around her. Other leaders stepped forward. Some had claws, others had scales or energy bodies, but they all bowed to her. "You are the first," they said, "the first to remember and return." In the center of this cosmic hall, a beacon began to rise. It was shaped like a tower, but made of sound. Every note Rena had heard since the beginning, every beat, every hum was part of it. The beacon pulsed once, and a wave shot across the universe. Every race heard it. On frozen planets, sleeping children opened their eyes. On dying worlds, forgotten machines rebooted. On Earth, radios buzzed, satellites flashed red. And one child whispered to the sky, "Something's coming." But it wasn't an attack, it was a question. The choir sang the final note, and the voice of the stars spoke to all of them, to all who forgot the pact, to all who broke the bond. "We offer no punishment, only one final choice. Earth's leaders gathered in confusion and awe, their screens filled with symbols and songs they didn't understand. But people, normal people, began to dream again of cathedrals in space, of bridges made of sound, of voices calling them home. Rena floated at the center of the storm. The universe spun around her. She spoke without sound. "We choose to remember." And with those words, the beacon flared brighter than any star. It didn't destroy, it revealed. Old ruins glowed with new life, lost ships powered on people. From forgotten colonies stood up, feeling something inside awaken. The sacred night was not just a one-time event, it was a beginning. The stars themselves turned slightly, not physically, but with intention, as if the universe had been holding its breath and now exhaled. Cato stood beside Rena, blinking in the light. "We did it," he whispered. "No," she said, smiling. "We remembered it." The choir began to fade, not into silence, but into everywhere. They were no longer just singers. They were now part of the stars. Part of every world that chose to listen, and Earth, at last, listened. Back on the Aurora Watch, the remaining crew watched as the ship's systems came alive. New maps appeared, new pathways, new missions not from any command center, but from the stars themselves. The sacred night was now eternal, and wherever darkness tried to grow again, the song would return, guided by those brave enough to answer it.